Greetings and welcome to a Simmers morning skate with none other than an old friend, Jeff Merrick. Holy smokes, Jeff Merrick, it's been a long time.
Buddy. Oh, has it ever, eh? The Louis Vuittons we wear under our eyes are well earned, my friend. We've been at it quite some time. I was thinking about you the other day
Uh-oh.
because I was going down memory lane about some old Red Wings stories, and I picked up your old great Red Wings book. So I there's a couple I have actually on my shelf that have the Rob Simpson signature to it. So
Nice.
you been good? You're all right?
Doing all right, hanging in there at Seattle and a little controversy in Vancouver, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, the winged wheel, that was my favorite of all of them because of the pictures in there mainly, because there's a
Yeah.
dramatic number of photographs in that book. But there's been some fun stuff produced. Of course, Jeff Merrick, he's sitting in front of his Sportsnet mic. He has the Jeff Merrick Show on radio, and
Yeah.
of course, the famous podcast with Friedge. I ran into Elliot Friedman at the some of the Winter Classic festivities the other day, and
Hmm.
you two guys kicking arse when it comes to
Eh.
your
We're
30
fooling.
thoughts.
We're fooling people, Simmer. We're fooling people.
Hey, let's talk about the team that my prop behind my shoulder here. These Canucks, those are the retired sweaters. Uh,
Yep.
they might have a couple more retired sweaters down the road a ways with some of the play that's going on right now with Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson. But is
Yep.
is that the biggest surprise in the league? Consistent surprise this year in the league as this
Uh, I,
unfolds?
it's a great question. I think it's between Vancouver and Winnipeg. Like I really do. I think as far as like, well, I think first of all, I think Florida's a good story too, because I think everyone was just sort of wondering was last year's, cup run, considering they had to, it took until game 82 until they made it in that infamous Chicago-Pittsburgh game on the Tuesday night that opened the door for all of it. I think we wondered whether that was legitimate or whether that was fool's gold from the Florida
Yeah,
Panthers. Make no mistake about it, this team is legit. Although we'll see about the Barkov injury here and what happens there. But I think as far as comeback teams, maybe a little bit of a surprise. I think Vancouver and Winnipeg. Winnipeg, like it's a team that you just can't score 3 goals on. Like they just do not surrender more than 3 goals a game, and they're doing it with a defense that I still think is very unheralded. We all know about Josh Morrissey, but how many conversations have you had about Dylan DeMello lately? How many conversations have you had about Brendan Dillon or Neil Pionk lately, Summer? So and they're doing it all without Kyle Connor as well, which is remarkable. And that's probably why Rick Bowness is going to get some Jack Adams consideration. But you look at what Vancouver's doing. Like they're not just like they've gone from being, way outside of the playoff picture to being a team that's tops in the Pacific. And specifically right now, where the Vegas Golden Knights have taken a step backwards
yeah,
and the Los Angeles Kings have taken a step backwards. I know Thursday night wasn't exactly kind to the Vancouver Canucks. Tough one there, but consistently, this has been one of the best stories in the NHL. And you have players at every position who will be significant candidates for trophies.
yeah.
And you have someone behind the bench as well who will be a candidate for a trophy as well. So yeah, Vancouver's got it going on. And it's a fun the thing. Here's the thing too. Like they're a fun team to watch.
Yeah.
Like there are just so many different personalities and players that have so many different, styles and ways to play as well. Like just from an entertainment point of view, Vancouver's like I always talk about speed. I call them speed bump teams. Teams like, oh, I'm flipping by. Oh, Vancouver's on. You have to stop and you have to watch when the Vancouver Canucks are playing.
Yeah, and leading the league in goals per game, and I think St. Louis happened to play probably their best game of the season.
Robert Thomas was great. Like
Yeah,
honestly, Robert, that was one of the best games this season for Robert Thomas
yeah,
too.
they just shut him
Easily.
down.
Yep.
But they rack up the goals. And Huggy, Quinn Hughes, I loved it when they got Roenick because they talked about ad nauseum. I mean, Luke Shin filled in admirably as kind of his protector, right? But they
Yep.
needed a right hander. They needed a right hander. They talked about it. And Philip Hronik, it was just time. It was a change of scenery
That,
out of Detroit, and it fit in
yeah.
beautifully.
I always wonder about, the hardest shot competition. And I know it's they just bring in the all-stars and then they choose from there who's going to take the hardest shot or who's going to compete for the hardest shot. I like the idea of bringing in specialists at the all-star. And for hardest shot, I want to see Ryan Pulak versus Philip Hronik.
Hmm,
That to me is the showdown for who's got the
nice.
hardest shot. I'll take now the Char is out of the mix, right? That's who I'll take. I mean, they see the Ryan Pulak, Philip Hronik showdown for who's got the real hardest shot in the league.
By the way, speaking of Chara, when does 33 go to the rafters? I sent him a
Soon
text
as
on that topic,
soon
and he's kind of like,
soon as soon as soon as possible.
yeah, what the
That
heck's going
guy's
on?
there was, I think it was a 2000 and what it probably was their Stanley Cup year, that when you look at the underlying numbers, when look at the possession numbers, when Patrice Bergeron and Zdeno Chara were on the ice together, like nobody touched the puck. Like it
Mhm.
was like the possession number like 65, 70, because it's obscene.
Yeah,
Like it's like it was a real luxury for Claude Julien to be able to look at, Chara and Bergeron and say, my two best offensive players are also my two best defensive players. It's impossible for me to lose a line matchup, both you guys over the boards.
right. By the way, yeah, it's funny that we're talking Canucks, of course, and that was 7-game series. They lose it at
Yep.
home. Patrice Bergeron with the Cup winner. But you talk about the personalities of this Canucks team. I've never had a problem with JT Miller. I love the guy's intensity. I don't mind he's a little bit pissy at times. I mean, that's just the way he is. He's a competitive guy, and he's kind of, I think, folded that into the personality of this hockey team. Now,
Hmm.
you're of course radio, podcast man, television man for
Yeah,
years. Here comes that transition. You ready for this, Jeff?
go for it.
Into World Juniors. It was JT Miller beating
Yeah.
Sweden in UFA 11 years ago.
Yeah.
And I bring this up because I ran into Andre Burakovsky in the dressing room for the Kraken the other day, and I said, were you 2014 World Juniors? He was not stoked because that was the year they lost in overtime
Yeah.
to Finland of the gold medal
Yeah.
game. And US had beaten Sweden the previous year. We've got a
Hmm.
USA Sweden game going on right now as you and I chat, so we're
Yep.
not going to get into that. But we can get into Canada being bounced by the Czechs, who ended up coming
Sure.
back to win the bronze. What's
Yep.
the fallout or the reaction?
Um, First of all, can I have a quick comment on JT Miller?
Yeah,
I don't know whether this is just a byproduct of me getting older, but the older I get, Simmer, the more I love being around grumpy people.
yep,
I don't know what it is. I love the like once upon a time used to bug me. Now I find it funny.
right.
I love I love grouchy hockey players who show up to the rink and the first thing they do is complain about the coffee, or just like a grump, like the Prongers and the Ryan Kesslers and the. I love being around people like that. It doesn't bother me at all when people are crusty. So I'm with you. Like I love the intensity of JT Miller. The player is outstanding. I don't even mind that he's grumpy. I
You
don't.
know,
I kind of like it, man.
you know why you like it and you don't mind grumpy guys? And I had this conversation with John Tortorella last week, and now I'm starting to ask other head coaches.
Yeah,
I'm like, the physicality, where are we at right now? And is it always seemed to be misdirected? And my direct question was, when's the last time you saw a momentum fight? In other words, my team's flat, tie score, or we're down a goal, we're playing like
yeah,
crap. It's the 5 minutes in the second period. You know what? I'm going to find a dance partner. We're going to get this crowd going, and we're going to get my team sparked. That
yeah,
hasn't happened in forget weeks
yeah.
or months. That's just all the coaches are like, yeah, it just doesn't happen
Doesn't
anymore.
Despite Patrick Maroon's best efforts to bring that vibe back, and we've
Yeah,
seen him try it a number of times. And listen, we saw him, him and Austin Watson on Thursday night in a very spirited bout, Minnesota and Tampa. You're right, that really doesn't exist anymore. But to the question about the World Juniors and Team Canada, I mean, I think everybody understands that winning back to back is hard and three-peating is nearly impossible. And
yeah.
that's what was being asked of this Canadian crew. I know there's always the common Canadian excuse. Well, Connor Bedard's playing with Chicago, and Fantilli's in Columbus, and Benson's in Buffalo, and Korchinski is in Chicago. Like, there's always that. Well, if we really did send our best, I mean, Sweden would be saying, yeah, well, what about that Leo Carlson guy who's in
Right,
Anaheim? We'd love to have him
right.
right now. Thank you very much. I think that a couple of things. I think people understand how hard that is, and I think that now more so than ever. And I think this is a great thing for hockey. There are a lot of other countries that have quote unquote caught up to Canada.
To
And I
get
think
here.
the big one, and they're poised for success for a long, long time, is the United States. And one of the things that I think people have always feared, hockey people around the world have always feared, is what happens when the elite athletes in the United States start choosing hockey first.
Right.
Like it used to be like that the top American athletes, they would choose football or track and field or baseball or basketball or whatever it was. And hockey was like way down the ladder of athletes. That's what, as far as the hierarchy goes, that's what they would choose. But now what you're seeing, and you can make the argument that maybe Austin Matthews is the best example of it, or maybe Anders Lee is another great example too. You're getting the elite athletes playing hockey. And that should frighten everybody around the world. Because A, the athletes are fantastic and you have, 300 million people to choose from.
Yeah.
You have a great hothouse for hockey and you have the money and you have the facilities and you have the infrastructure. Like, I was saying this the other day on the radio, like I have these, as best I can call them, immigrant fantasies of what it must be like to be trained, in America as a hockey player, where, I mean, you've been to all these rinks, you've been to these workout facilities, like it's first rate.
Yeah.
And the trainers and the brain trust and the structure and, the development programs. It's incredible.
Yeah.
And now Canada has to compete against that, and Sweden competes against that, and Finland competes against that. And if that situation ever resolves itself to the point where they'll be welcomed back into the mix in international hockey, they have to compete against this American model and these American teams. It's like I think that the one lesson I think that everyone should take from this is that A, it's hard to three-peat, and two, man, the USA looks really good and are poised to be great for a long time. We'll see what happens next year when the tournament comes back to Canada and they're playing on the smaller ice surface and not the 200 by 100.
Yeah. And they just announced mini St. Paul for the following.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that'll be great. Last thing, because I know you got a boogie. You're talking about kids and growing up and playing hockey. So we both did a little bit of that.
Yeah.
And the ponds
Yeah.
actually froze. When I first started skating, it was November to March. Maybe you'd
Yep.
skate every single day. Now it might be one weekend on that same pond.
Yeah.
Um, we just had the holidays. We just had the New Year. What's your fondest? By the way, nice as your Malak watch.
Ah, and the old Seals jersey
Look at
too.
that.
Yeah. I still, just a quick aside, I still
Yeah,
maintain if this man in the 70s played on either the Montreal Canadiens or the Philadelphia Flyers or the Boston Bruins or the New York Islanders, we'd be talking about him as being one of the greats of all time. He would be in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Instead, Milosh played for the Seals and the Barons and a bad Minnesota team.
yeah.
That's the guy that I always point like, man, if only he would have played on one of those powerhouses. Like if he had Perrant's spot, or if he had Billy Smith's spot, or if he had Dryden's spot or Cheever's spot, we'd be talking about Joe Milosh as if he was one of the best.
Very fair.
Um, I got a good memory for you.
Okay.
This one, I love telling this story, and it's got a good punchline to it as well. So when I was a kid, skating outdoors was commonplace, like you. And in the west end of Toronto, there's a park called High Park. And there's Grenadier Pond there, and that's a pond we used to skate on. But the actual arena itself, they had one rink for pleasure skating and one rink for hockey. And my dad would always take me there as a kid. Now, this happened when I was about 7 years old. So he'd always take me Sunday mornings before it started to fill up. So we would get there at 7 o'clock in the morning. And it'd just be my dad and I passing the puck, and I'd be working on my empty net goals or whatever it was that I was doing. And one week, Simmer, out of nowhere, it's like a Field of Dreams moment, like out of the corn. So out of nowhere, Boreas Salming and Jim McKenney show up.
Wow.
Okay. And I'm like, oh, I just watched these guys on Hockey Night in Canada last night. This is where, Boreas Salming lived around the corner at High Park Avenue, and Jim McKenney lived on Ellis. So they were sort of right, then High Park was right in between those two streets. And I could just see like my dad is beaming because Boreas Salming's passing me the puck. And I'm like, doing one timers of Boreas Salming. This is like the coolest thing in the world ever. Like I still remember it like it was yesterday. So
Awesome.
years later, I'm going to high school at Humberside in the West End, and on our hockey team is Jim McKenney's son, Jason. And so we're at Jason's house one day. This is when Jim McKenney later went on to become a sportscaster in Toronto. And I go up to Howie and I say, like, you probably don't remember this, Jim, but like I'm like a little kid and I was out there with my dad and you and Boreas showed up and it was incredible. So early in the morning and we were playing hockey and I got some memory I'm gonna have forever. And he goes, oh yeah, I'll be honest with you. Like that was we hadn't been home yet and we needed to have a skate to sort of clear our minds before we went back home to our wives, essentially saying, yeah, we needed a sober up skate, and you just happened to be there. And I'm like, okay, I kind of get that now. Like, well, I never thought of like, why would Borje Salming and Jim McKenney be out here skating? But there it is, and that's my fondest skating outdoors memory of all time, skating with Borje Salming and Jim McKenney, two great
Ama-
defensemen.
It's amazing. By the way, you must have been going through it with all the Boria stuff a couple of years back when he had
I
playing.
it broke. He was my favorite player, number
Yeah,
21, and I still maintain he was the toughest player of the NHL. At least there's the toughest player the NHL ever saw. There's two ways to be tough. There's physically tough and impose your strength on someone else, but I think the stronger version of tough is being able to endure and not quit.
yeah,
Like, and you know what the Flyers did to Borje Salming. You know what the whole league did to
I
Borje
do. Yeah,
Salming,
it's
and
good.
he
But
just
Hughes,
kept coming right back.
yeah,
And I never saw an athlete in finer shape than Boreas Salming. I mean, the stories of him like going to morning skate on a Saturday morning and then going skiing all day and then coming back and playing hockey at night and still being the first star and the best player on the ice. I mean, those stories are all true and they're all legendary. Like everything about Salming was great.
yeah,
Larger than life personality, great skater. And I still remember because Canada Cup 76 was the first big tournament for me. I was too young for 72. 76 resonated with me. And I still even just thinking about it, watching Salming playing for Sweden on the blue line, being announced before a game against Team Canada, and the standing ovation from everybody at Maple Leaf Gardens as he's wearing he's wearing the gold and the blue. He's wearing the
great
tricorner.
corner.
And that to me is one of my great memories of Borje Salming, and it was such a delight to watch him play for the Maple Leafs for all those years. What a graceful skater! Like could play today. Like how like if again like he's one of those guys who could play in any era because he was strong and he was a brilliant skater as well and fearless. Like in that era of the Flamingo, you remember the Flamingo go out to block a shot and stick up one leg. Borje Salming dove in front of everything,
Everything.
taking shots off his head and his shoulder and his chest and occasionally his shin pads and his pants. Like that guy was like a puck vacuum. Fearless,
Yeah.
fearless player. Loved him.
Well, as my friend Jeff Marek often likes to say, we'll leave it there because you've just rounded it out perfectly, and I think that's
Thanks,
why you
buddy.
use that phrase because it's the perfect conclusion.
Thanks, man.
Um, Jeff, always a pleasure, and
Yes,
let's do
sir.
this more often since we've been really our schedule been whacked over probably the last
Yeah,
year. So
yeah.
it's been a long time coming, but I'm sure we'll be chatting again. And I miss our we used to be on the air together 2, 3 times a week. It seems like
Loved it.
not
Loved
yeah,
it. Loved it. Miss it. Yeah, buzz back
yeah,
anytime. Love to be at the lodge with you. I love
yes.
the hockey lodge here. This
The
is real
Hockey Cabin,
nice.
the Hockey Lodge. Jeff Merrick of Sportsnet Radio, and of course of the with Frege on the 32 Thoughts podcast. Great stuff. Enjoy the
Thanks,
hockey
pal.
action, and we'll be talking to you soon.
You be good.